At the beginning of the American Civil War, the Union Army was relatively small compared to its size at its peak. Therefore, many important governmental posts and positions had to be filled. As would be expected, everyone was looking for favors and hoping that they could get their loved ones the best jobs possible. In 1860, before the Civil War started, the federal budget was $78 million. In 1867, the budget had risen to $376.8 million. The Army went from 16,000 soldiers at peacetime to 1 million by 1865. Dealing with growth of this size will always lead to corruption and nepotism to a degree, as we are all humans. This was a big problem for Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet, and they knew it. One such instance involving Mary Todd Lincoln and U.S. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton is a great example on how to deal with it. Edwin Stanton came in to replace Simon Cameron, who was accused of using his office for his own gain and that of his friends. Stanton came in and tried to change all that. He fired the staff and hired people he trusted to help him run the department. He limited when the politicians and connected people could visit him to ask for a favor, and generally tried to ensure that merit won positions and not who you knew. One day Stanton said, one of those indescribable half-loafers, half-gentlemen, who carried with him a note from Mrs. Lincoln, asking that the man be made commissary. Edwin Stanton denied the request, ripping up the letter and sending the man on his way. Which was a really bold move, as the president's wife has sent this man, and the president was his direct boss whom he met with on a daily basis. This same situation played out the next day when the man showed up again. This next scene of the conversation between Edwin Stanton and Mrs. Lincoln comes from the book Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. That afternoon, Stanton called on Mrs. Lincoln. He told her that, in the midst of a great war for national existence, his first duty is to the people, and his next duty is to protect your husband's honor, and your own. If he appointed unqualified men simply to return favors, it would strike at the very root of all confidence. Mary understood his argument completely. "Mr. Stanton, you are right," she told him, "and I will never ask you for anything again." True to her word, Stanton affirmed she never did. This is really just a true masterclass of how to deal with this situation by both sides. And it is also an important lesson to learn when you are in power. Be direct, but nice. Stanton asked her for a meeting, and they spoke to each other clearly but with respect. Stanton explained his reasoning with clarity, and also with a sense of friendship to her and her husband, as he was making the decision partly for them. Edwin Stanton knew the Union had enemies on all sides. They were fighting the bloodiest war in American history, but they were also fighting on a moral level. The government itself was in question and at stake. When Stanton came into office, he had to fix corruption and stop people from stealing. People had their friends getting big contracts, people getting jobs they didn't deserve. Sound familiar? So for Stanton to rip up a letter written by the president's wife must have given him some pause and think he might be losing his job. In order to be able to do what Stanton did, you have to be a man of honor, a man whose reputation is beyond reproach. Because if Stanton was even a little bit corrupt, had given one political favor, that would have opened the door for Mrs. Lincoln to say, "But what about this guy or this situation? You did the same thing here." But Stanton had not done that before, so he had principles to stand on, and was able to make that argument. Once you compromise your integrity and honor, and people know this happened, there is no way to get it back, and everyone will be looking for the same treatment. Mary Lincoln also handled this situation with great grace, wisdom, and understanding. She listened to what Mr. Stanton said, thought about it, understood the logic behind his actions, and accepted the answer. It is not her fault to try and get someone she knows a safe job at the commissary office, away from the fighting. The fighting in the Civil War was among the worst ever to fall upon individual soldiers. She didn't go off and tell her husband and force him to do something about it, as that puts both men in terrible spots. Lincoln would then have to overrule his subordinate and make himself look bad, and Stanton would have to accept this person, hold resentment for having to do so, and fracture a relationship that needed to be ironclad. Or Lincoln would have had to tell his wife no, which no one needs domestic strife on top of running a country and trying to win a war. And Abraham Lincoln was also smart enough not to press the subject, and place making his wife happy over the survival of the United States and the ending of slavery. He understood what was at stake, and how history will look at us all. It is better to keep your honor and respect in place, than to temporarily make a friend or family member happy for a short time. We should learn from all three people in this situation as a guide for how to handle nepotism and people asking for favors.